Billionaires don't just buy yachts, they buy things that would get you arrested, entire neighborhoods, private security forces, media companies, politicians. And the craziest part is, they didn't break the law, they changed it. These are the things billionaires bought that should be illegal. When Mark Zuckerberg bought his house in Palo Alto in 2011, he paid about $7 million for it. That alone isn't shocking. Silicon Valley is full of expensive homes. What happened next is what makes this different. Over the next few years, Zuckerberg quietly bought at least 4 of the homes directly surrounding his house. The reports estimate he spent around $30 million, total buying up nearby properties. That means one person ended up controlling most of the houses touching his own. Each purchase was legal. Each seller agreed to sell. On paper, nothing looks wrong, but zoom out and look at what that actually does. Imagine you live in a neighborhood where houses normally sell for a few $1,000,000. Then one of the richest people on earth moves in and starts paying above market prices to secure the homes around him. Home values go up. That sounds great at first, until property taxes go up too. Then construction starts. Some houses get remodeled, others get rebuilt. Security increases. Streets get blocked for work crews. What used to be a normal residential block slowly turns into a private compound. No one knocks on your door and forces you to leave, but staying becomes harder. If you don't sell, you're the one house sitting inside someone else's expanding security zone. You're surrounded by properties owned by a billionaire. The neighborhood you moved into is gone. It's now an extension of someone else's estate. And here's the part that makes it darker. Most people can't afford to buy even one extra house for privacy. Zuckerberg didn't just buy privacy, he bought control of the space around him. There's no law that says one person can't own an entire block. There's no review board that steps in and says, maybe this is too much for one private individual. If you have enough money, you can just keep buying until there's nothing left to buy. And once that happens, it's not really a neighborhood anymore. It's territory. Owning the neighborhood is just step one. Some billionaires are protected at a level that looks more like a private military than a security team. Take Jeff Bezos. Reports show Bezos spends around $1.6 million per year on personal security. That number alone is insane. That's more than many towns spend protecting everyone who lives there, and that's just to protect one man. But the money's only part of it. After the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi and the alleged hacking of Bezos' phone, his protection reportedly intensified. We're not talking about one bodyguard walking beside him. At this level, security can include former military personnel, digital threat analysts, armored transport, hardened properties, and advanced teams that secure locations before he arrives. That's not just security, that's infrastructure. And here's where it starts to feel different from normal life. If you get into a dispute with someone, you're dealing with that person and maybe their lawyer. If someone gets into a serious conflict with a billionaire at this level, they're dealing with trained professionals whose full-time job is to shield that person from threats, pressure, and exposure. There are legal teams on standby. There are surveillance systems already in place. There are people whose only responsibility is containment. The power imbalance isn't subtle. The law is supposed to treat everyone equally, but equality assumes both sides rely on the same public systems: police, courts, due process. When someone can afford a permanent layer of private protection that operates independently of those systems, the rules start to feel different. It doesn't mean they're invading countries. It doesn't mean they're breaking laws openly. It means they don't have to experience vulnerability the way normal people do. And when you combine that kind of protection with unlimited money, legal teams, and influence, you start to see how insulated the top really is. Security at that scale isn't just about safety. It's about control. And controlling your physical space is powerful, but controlling what people believe about you, that's even more powerful. Protecting yourself is powerful, but controlling what millions of people believe, that's a different level of power. That's what Rupert Murdoch built his empire on. Murdoch doesn't just own one newspaper. He's controlled major outlets like Fox News, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Post, and large media networks across the UK and Australia. That's not one voice. That's an ecosystem. When a billionaire owns networks watched by millions every night, they don't need to hold office to influence politics. They influence what topics dominate the conversation. They influence how politicians are framed. They influence which scandals get attention and which fade away. Elections can swing based on media coverage. Public opinion shifts based on repetition. Markets react to headlines. Now imagine one individual controlling a machine that produces those headlines every single day. That's not just business. That's narrative power. And it's completely legal. There's no rule that says a billionaire can't own massive chunks of the information system. But when one person controls the microphone that millions rely on to understand the world, they don't just report on power, they shape it. Owning media shapes opinion. But if you have enough money, you don't even need to own a network. You can just flood the system directly. That's what Michael Bloomberg showed everyone in 2020. During the presidential race, Bloomberg spent over $1 billion of his own money on advertising and political influence. That's not a typo. $1 billion. For comparison, that's more than many entire political campaigns raise over multiple election cycles. And here's the wild part. He didn't even win. He dropped out after Super Tuesday. So what was that $1 billion really for? Influence? Ads ran everywhere. Online, television, social media, every platform. His messaging flooded the information space whether people supported him or not. And this isn't about Bloomberg being being evil. It's about what the system allows. There's no limit on how much of your own money you can spend trying to shape an election. If you're a normal citizen, your voice is one vote. If you're a billionaire, your voice can be a billion-dollar megaphone. Now think about that. If enough billionaires decide they don't like a policy, they don't need to protest in the streets. They fund ads. They fund PACs. They fund lobbying groups. They fund candidates who agree with them. It's legal. It's called political spending. But when money reaches that scale, it doesn't just participate in democracy. It overwhelms it. Land gives you space. Security gives you protection. Media gives you narrative power. Money gives you leverage inside the law itself. And once you can influence the people who write the laws, you don't have to worry as much about breaking them. Influence is powerful, but the real advantage shows up when something goes wrong. For most people, if you get sued, accused, or caught in a scandal, you go to court. Your name becomes public. Records are filed. Consequences stick. For billionaires, there's another option. Write a check. Over the years, Donald Trump has faced dozens of lawsuits involving businesses, contractors, and former associates. Many of them didn't end with dramatic court battles. They ended in settlements. A settlement means the case stops. No trial, no verdict, often no public details. In many cases, non-disclosure agreements are signed. That means the other side agrees not to talk. This isn't unique to Trump. It's common at the top. NDAs are legal. Settlements are legal. Businesses use them every day. But when someone has nearly unlimited resources, lawsuits don't function the same way. If a normal person gets hit with a massive lawsuit, it can bankrupt them, it can ruin their life. They have to fight or lose everything. If a billionaire gets hit with one, it becomes a cost calculation. How much is silence worth? How much is avoiding headlines worth? How much is preventing a trial worth? And when the answer is less than I make in a week, the decision becomes simple. The system is designed to punish wrongdoing, but when the punishment is money, and someone has more money than the punishment can realistically hurt, the system doesn't stop them. It invoices them. And this is where the imbalance becomes obvious. Justice is supposed to be equal, but equal only works if the consequences feel the same on both sides. For some people, a fine means financial ruin. For others, it means adjusting a spreadsheet. And once you realize that money can soften almost any blow, the next step isn't just protecting yourself from consequences. It's buying things that affect everyone else. Not houses, not headlines, not lawsuits. Things people depend on to live. Buying influence is powerful. Paying off problems is powerful. But owning the basics of life, that's different. Over the past few years, Bill Gates quietly became the largest private farmland owner in the United States. Reports estimate he owns around 270,000 acres of farmland across multiple states. That's not a hobby garden. That's land that grows food. Land that affects crop supply. Land that affects pricing. Land that affects water use. And again, this isn't illegal. Anyone with enough money can buy farmland. But scale changes the meaning. Most people can't afford 1 acre of farmland. One individual controlling hundreds of thousands of acres starts to feel different because food isn't optional. Water isn't optional. If housing prices rise, you can move. If gas prices rise, you can drive less. But if food supply is disrupted, everyone feels it. Now, Gates isn't personally farming these acres. They're managed like investments, often leased to operators. But ownership still matters. Ownership means control over how land is used, what gets planted, how it's developed, whether it stays farmland or becomes something else. And here's the uncomfortable question. Should one private individual be allowed to accumulate that much control over something every human depends on? There's no law stopping it. There's no public vote required. If you have the capital, you can keep buying. And this is the shift. We started with houses in one neighborhood. Now we're talking about resources that affect millions of people. That's escalation. And it gets bigger because farmland is still inside a country. What happens when a billionaire buys almost an entire island? Farmland is one thing, but what if you bought almost an entire island? In 2012, Larry Ellison bought about 98% of the Hawaiian island of Lanai. Not a house on the island, not a section of land, 98% of it. The purchase price was reported to be around $300 million. Lanai isn't empty land. People live there. There are schools, businesses, roads, and homes. When Ellison bought it, he didn't just become a property owner. He became the dominant landholder. That means most housing on the island ties back to him. Major resorts tie back to him. Large portions of infrastructure connect to him. Legally, the island is still part of Hawaii. It still follows US law. But when one person owns almost all of the land, power shifts. If you live there, your landlord is tied to that one owner. If you work there, your employer likely connects back to that owner. If development happens, it happens because that owner approves it. That's not a normal real estate purchase. That's near total control of a physical place where people build their lives. Again, it's legal. The sellers agreed to sell. The government approved the transaction. But think about the scale. Most people will never own one home outright. One billionaire owns almost an entire island. And once you reach that level of ownership, you're not just investing, you're shaping the future of that place, the economy, the development, the direction. That's not just wealth, that's concentrated control. And we still haven't reached the most uncomfortable level yet, because land, security, media, politics, all of that still operates inside national borders. What happens when billionaires start buying ways to move beyond borders altogether? Land ties you to a country, laws tie you to a country, taxes tie you to a country, unless you can afford to untie yourself. Most people are born with one passport, and that's it. If they want to move somewhere else permanently, it takes years. Applications, interviews, waiting, rejections. For billionaires, there's another option. Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal and early investor in Facebook, was granted New Zealand citizenship after spending relatively little time in the country. Under normal rules, you're expected to live in New Zealand for over 1,000 days before applying. Thiel reportedly spent only a small fraction of that time physically there, yet he was granted citizenship under special provisions. Completely legal, completely approved. But it shows something important. Citizenship, something most people treat as permanent and binding, can become flexible when you have enough capital and influence. Why does that matter? Because citizenship determines taxes. It determines which laws apply to you. It determines where you can go if things go wrong somewhere else. For normal people, leaving your country is emotional and complicated. For billionaires, it can be strategic. If regulation tightens in one country, they can move assets. If taxes increase, they can restructure. If political instability rises, they already have options. They don't just diversify investments, they diversify countries. And again, nothing illegal happened here, but when ordinary people are locked into systems, they can't escape, and the ultra-wealthy can simply purchase flexibility. That's a different level of advantage. We started with buying houses. Now we're talking about buying exits. And once you can control land, shape media, influence politics, soften consequences, own resources, dominate territory, and move between jurisdictions, the only thing left is control over the future itself. Land is powerful, media is powerful, political money is powerful, but the biggest advantage comes when you fund technology that governments don't even fully understand yet, because laws always move slower than innovation. Take Elon Musk. Through Neuralink, Musk is funding brain implant technology designed to connect human brains directly to computers. That's not a small upgrade to a phone. That's altering how humans interact with machines at the biological level. Animal trials have already happened. Human trials have begun. The technology is moving forward, while regulators are still debating how it should even be classified. Now step back and look at the pattern. Governments regulate things after they exist. Billionaires fund them before they're regulated. If something revolutionary works, they control it early. If something fails, they absorb the loss and move on. Either way, they're ahead of the rules. And it's not just Neuralink. Artificial intelligence, private space companies, biotech research, longevity experiments, some of the most powerful technologies shaping the next 50 years are being funded and directed by individuals, not governments. That doesn't automatically mean it's evil, but it means the direction of humanity isn't being decided only through public institutions. It's being shaped by whoever can afford to push the frontier first. Most people don't get a vote on experimental brain implants. They don't get a vote on AI systems. They don't get a vote on private space expansion, but those systems will still affect their lives. And here's the theme across everything we've covered. Nothing we talked about was technically illegal. Buying neighborhoods, building private security, owning media, spending billions on elections, settling lawsuits, owning farmland, buying islands, purchasing second citizenship, funding unregulated technology, all legal. That's what makes it uncomfortable, because this isn't about crime. It's about scale. At a certain level of wealth, you stop living inside the same limits as everyone else. You don't just buy things. You buy insulation from the normal experience of consequences. And when enough insulation exists, the rules stop feeling equal. That doesn't mean every billionaire is evil, but it does mean the system allows levels of control that most people never think about. We started with one house in one neighborhood. We ended with people funding the next stage of humanity, and none of it required breaking the law. That's the part that should make you think.